Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very multifaceted and accomplished entrepreneur, coach, and author from the US, Mr. Rhett Power. Rhett, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you. Rhett is the co-founder of Wild Creations, a startup toy company. He's the co-founder at Courageous Leadership, a leadership consultancy company. He's a top small business coach. He's an author of a book titled The Entrepreneur's Book of Actions, and he's been recognized and felicitated globally. So let's, Rhett, with such an amazing range of experiences, I was trying to figure out what to ask you. So we'll first start with Wild Creations. Tell me about this and what was your motivation to start it?
Well, we'll probably get into this in a little bit, but I've defined my life by quitting.
Mm-hmm.
And people always look at me a little crazy when I say, that I quit things. Well, I'll have to explain that. At every stage of my life, I've quit something to start something new and to start something that I needed to do for my own sort of well-being and my own sense of curiosity and my own sense of where I needed to go with my life. And Wild Creations was one of those sort of pivotal moments where I had quit my radio. At a university, I worked for a company called Clear Channel Communications, which is a huge radio and broadcast conglomerate in the United States. And I'd quit that job to join the US Peace Corps and go overseas and volunteer to teach.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a teacher at a university. And then after that Peace Corps experience, I worked for USAID in Central Asia for about 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to this point in that job, which, it was a great job. I was in international development. I was getting to help people. The
Mm-hmm.
job had meaning. But there was something in my gut that said, you just like it was when I joined the Peace Corps and I quit my professional radio job. There was something else that was nagging me. It was that internal voice.
Mm-hmm.
I just wrote a book on this sort of our internal dialogue that we have, all of us have with ourselves. But that internal dialogue was telling me it's time to do something different. And so what I landed on with a business partner was this one product toy company in South Carolina called Wild Creations. It was terribly run. It was terribly managed.
Mm-hmm.
It was my lawyer said, if you buy that company, I'm going to disown you. This is a bad idea. But we fell in love with the product, and the guy was going to retire. And we said, we can infuse energy into this. We can take our business skills and our business knowledge of marketing. And the business partner was a finance guy, and I was the product guy and the sales guy, and we can do something with this. We absolutely believed we could do something with this.
Right.
That's what we did. We were able to take that small one product toy company and turn it into a global company operating in 35 countries. And we were able to scale the product and grow it. And our first 3 products were Toys of the Year. But it was really, that was really the vision behind it. We just wanted to do something. It was sort of a calling, so to speak. We really had to, and it wasn't necessarily toys, but that's where we landed. And I'm really glad we did, because it taught me so many lessons. And
what were some of the lessons that this taught you?
Oh, perseverance. It was one of those moments in our lives. We all have these moments in our lives that test us. And I'm sure you as an entrepreneur know what I'm talking about. That every day is a challenge. Every day you've got to get up with energy and grit. I grew up as a person. The things that bothered me early on as an entrepreneur, 5 years in, I'm like, we'll take care of that by lunch. That's not a problem. so I grew that. I grew emotionally as a leader, and my 20-year-old temperament, gave way to. I became more mature and more level-headed, probably kinder to people than I probably was when I was 20. More conscious of that. So just all kinds of life lessons I needed to have to grow
Fabulous.
and learn, and that was what I took away from it.
That's amazing. And you received 40 national awards. What
Mhm.
were these awards for?
A lot of it was for product design, for sales, I mean, we won, blue ribbons for, the toy,
Mhm.
for different companies for sales, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. But most of them were for awards, um, and it, it was an honor. But I honestly didn't really keep up with most of those. I think
Mm.
um, they weren't that important to me. Our internal goals to
Mm.
be significant in the toy industry, to be significant as a company, and to be significant as leaders was more important than a lot of that. Those were great. They, obviously in the marketing they help, and a little bit. It gives you a little bit of a boost
Oh,
to know that.
absolutely.
But,
Absolutely.
but
Absolutely.
at
So,
the end
Red,
of the day,
let's now move to your other organization, which is Courageous Lead. Um, Help me understand your perspective on the meaning of courageous leadership.
I think courage. I think there are a lot of myths
Mhm.
surrounding that word courage, right? The sort of typical definition of courage would be to do something that scares you, right? To overcome that fear and accomplish that
True.
goal or that mission or that thing.
Mm.
Um, but I think as a concept, courage as a concept is really very much misunderstood.
Mhm.
Um, so I think we have to first sort of define the word courage by what it isn't.
Mhm.
Um, we often think of courage as people running into a burning building, or we think of a fireman, or we think of an astronaut that blasts off into
Right.
space.
Mm.
Um, and we often also think that courage uh, is not something that applies to us. We also think that you can't really teach courage, right? That's something that's innate. That's something that these people are just born with,
Mm.
right? Um, and and I think and it, but I think the fact is that most people aren't going to do. It's also about fear.
Mm.
Most people aren't going to do something that scares them,
Mm.
right? So our belief is that you can teach courage.
Mhm.
You can put a process around this concept of courage,
Mm.
and we apply it to businesses and leadership. But I think you could probably do this with just about anything.
Mhm.
That you can, if you have the right mechanism and the right plan, and we have our principles of courage, which we call knowledge, faith, and action. And
Mm.
we believe if you have the knowledge you need to make a decision, right? The belief that
Mm.
I talked about belief earlier, belief in your mission, belief in your leadership, belief in your people. If you have that belief that sort of filters and permeates through the culture of the company or the organization,
Mm.
um, then the next step is the action step. And if you create a plan that says this is our action, this is what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, and you put all that together, then you can become a more courageous leader. You can become a more courageous organization.
Mm.
And that's what we teach at Courageous Leadership is how to put that process of knowledge, faith, and action in place. Because we've all worked, and I'm sure in a lot of those organizations you worked in,
Mm.
um, a lot of times we're sort of hampered by paralysis, right?
Correct.
And what that paralysis is fear.
Mm.
That's what that paralysis is.
Very
We all
interesting.
know that leaders that make decisions based on fear or don't make decisions based on fear. And so that's what we do is we try to help sort of take that fear part that permeates decision making out.
Mm.
So
Fascinating. So, when I was reading about you, there's an interesting phrase that popped up, which said that you help people to believe again.
mhm.
Help me understand this, and if possible, give me some, examples or anecdotes without names.
That's a great question. I believe, going back to what we were just talking about with courage, is that part of what you have to as a leader and as an organization,
Mm,
um, is you've got to have believership,
mm,
right? You've got to have people who believe that the mission is right, particularly today. Like that's becoming a real thing for us as leaders.
mm,
Our people have to believe in us,
mm,
and they have to believe in the mission, and your customers have to believe in you as a company,
mm,
right? That's becoming ever present in the way we buy things, the way we look at companies, because there's so much more information.
mm,
So you've got to have that believership in who you are, what you are, what your
mm,
mission is.
mm,
And so that's something we really try to focus on a lot. But and that means culture. But you break that down. That's the word culture that we hear a lot and we talk a lot
mhm,
about a lot. But I'll give you an example. We just worked on a project that we're wrapping up with a major healthcare system that's going through a bunch of change, a
mhm,
merger, a big merger. And one of the things that the as they were going through that process of the merger,
mm,
they were the ones being acquired. The C-suite was just hampered by paralysis,
mhm,
hampered by decision making, worried about their future, worried about their jobs, worried about what was next for them.
mhm,
And when you have a C-suite and an executive team that's worried about themselves, and they're worried about their own future, and they're worried about their own what's next for them, and the other 20,000 people that work in the company, they become not to be important. When it
mm,
becomes about them, then it's bad for the organization,
correct.
right? It's bad for and in that case, it can cost lives, right? When you're making fear-based decisions in an organization like that,
Mm,
that has huge impact.
mm,
And so we really help them put this process of this courageous decision making process in place, knowledge, faith, and action, and help them sort of get past that paralysis that was really actually causing them, and as you said, no names, but it was really causing them a lot of problems, a lot of
mm,
issues internally, um, and was ultimately was going to have the opposite effect of what they were operating on, which is, they were going to all probably lose their jobs because of the performance of the organization had taken a big dip
mhm,
while they were waiting on this sort of merger to happen. And while they were basing their decisions on fear, that was ultimately going to be counter sort of productive to what they were trying to do, which was stay out of you know, stay away from having to make tough decisions that might anger the company that was buying them. So anyway, that's an example, but we were able to help them see this
mm,
clearly from the outside. Uh, and when that light bulb went off, then you can have those transformative moments, and you can start to realize that you've got to change, and you've got to sort of put a different process in place. And that's what we were able to do.
fascinating. You also speak about the four truths of the business apocalypse.
Yes,
Tell me about this.
it sounds scary, and it is. It's
Yes.
very scary.
Yes.
Um, because if you're a Fortune 500 company, I think the average used to be 75 years that you were, a Fortune 500 company, that you stayed on that top of the pyramid there. And I think the average age now I think the average lifespan is like 11 years.
Correct.
So companies are getting disrupted. They're getting, if I put up a picture of like a business graveyard, we'd all recognize all those names that are in that business graveyard now,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes.
And so you got to do something different. We've got to think about leadership and management and culture and all of this just in a way different way, because that is the business apocalypse. Like you don't have long, right? So as a leader, right, there are four principles of this that I think of,
Mhm.
and um, businesses are perishing. That's the principle one. Like
Sure.
you don't have long, um, you don't have time, but you need time. As a CEO and in the C-suite, you only have a couple years. The lifespan of like a CEO and a senior vice president or someone in the C-suite is a very short period of time now. Like there's no more lifelong
Correct.
appointment as CEO. That just doesn't happen anymore. So you have a small amount of time to make your mark and to lead your organization. We also know that the pandemic was a huge highlight of this. And I'm borrowing this from Marshall Goldsmith, but what got you there won't keep you here, right? Right. So the path that you were on that got you to the pinnacle, to the top, is not the same path that's going to keep you there. So, you've got to rethink about this all the time. What's next? How do I progress? How do I stay relevant? How do we keep moving this company forward? You got to be able to pivot on a dime. I mean, the pandemic, we had to pivot to remote work almost instantly. And then the other part of the business apocalypse is this fear-based. We're wired to fear change. Our brains aren't wired to sort of welcome change in our arms. But we have to, with these four things, we've got to think about these four things. Is our organization embracing change? Is our organization, one of the things you hear a lot about are people quitting jobs, particularly in the United States. I don't know if that's happening in India, but I know that people are quitting their jobs. We lost 4 million jobs last month in the United States. And people were quitting because they're saying, look, for the last 2 years, I produced more than I've ever produced from home. Why is my boss saying, oh, now it's time to go back to the office? When you know that you can do what you're doing from home.
Correct.
Why go back to the old way? And I'm dealing with a company right now that's like, well, I've got to see people at their desks. That's how I know they're working. And I'm like, look, you're losing engineers, you're losing professional staff right and left because other companies are willing to manage differently. And if you don't do that, you're going to get killed here.
Correct.
And so, and they're not listening. So my message isn't working in that case, but they've got to get over their own thing in their own brain that's saying, I've got to have them here. I've got to control them in that way. And it's an old way of thinking.
Well said. So one more question regarding leadership, and then we'll talk about your book. Given the number of people that you would have worked with on leadership, what is your experience of having worked with the younger generation of leaders who are coming in, like the millennials and the Gen Z?
I think what I love about working with younger people is I learn just as much from them. And I'll put it this way: my son, he's 17. His first summer job last year was a remote job, and it got me really thinking about his future. His future is going to be way different than I could ever imagine. And so I love working with young people. I just did an interview with 9 teenagers from the Knowledge Society. Talk about inspiring. I mean, they're thinking of things that are just absolutely, I know that there are 2 or 3 Nobel Prize winners in that group. They're the smartest teens in the world, and they're working in lab. And these are 15-year-olds that are working in labs and creating plastics and creating new, biochemical. I mean, they're just brilliant young people. I look at them, and it gives me hope. It gives me inspiration. So I think, us that have a little bit of gray hair, what bothers me is I hate this. Oh, young people today. I hate this sort of attitude that you get sometimes from people my age. Oh, young people today, they just don't know. They don't understand. Okay, they don't have reality, right? I think that if we listen to them and we listen to what they want out of work, what they expect out of work, and what work means to them, and what I think that we can all learn lessons from each other about. So that's my take on working with young people. I actually like it. Like I wouldn't understand social media or any of this stuff, this new media, these platforms, if it wasn't for young people who.
That's it. What a great response. So, Rhett, now let's move to the last segment of our conversation, which is your book, The Entrepreneur's Book of Actions. Tell me about your book and Based on your research for this book, what are some of the key challenges startup entrepreneurs face?
Yeah, I thanks for bringing the book up. I want to say I have another one coming out this year on our self-talk, but this book, for me was I have the worst case of ADD in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, this book was a little bit different. And it sort of mirrors a process I use in my own sort of daily management of myself.
Okay.
I'll reiterate that. I manage myself every day. I have to manage myself every day.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the lessons I want people to take out of this book. As a leader, as a business person, you got to manage yourself every day. And so for me, with my brain, the way it works, I have to sit down and make a conscious effort every day to write things down, to analyze how I'm doing, how am I performing today? How is Rhett performing today? What have been my challenges today? And I have to write that stuff down. So this book it's not a book that it is 300 pages, but it's not a book that you just sort of read in a sitting and then take a few little nuggets of knowledge from. It's a daily guide, really. And I make you sit down for 20 minutes a day and think. And there are a bunch of activities in it and a bunch of segments in it. All of things I think help us be better at entrepreneurship, better as a manager, better as a leader, and they're common sense things, a lot of it. But for example, I was trying to think of a good example here, but I didn't realize that I like to say yes until I owned my own business. I didn't realize that about myself. I like telling people yes. I like being able to say, yes, I can do that. But I had to learn how to say no as an entrepreneur. I couldn't say yes to everything. Otherwise, I'd have been bankrupt. So, it really does help you think about those things about yourself and learn about yourself. But then also this the practical stuff about managing your money, managing your time, managing your network, actually using your network, growing, how to actually grow a network that can help you grow your business. So it's a very practical guide that I thought was really helpful for me, and it's how I manage my daily life as a business person even today. But you got to it helps you create that habit of self-analysis, self-reflection, learning to work in the business or on the business, not in the business. My business didn't grow until I took myself out of it and started thinking about the big stuff that I needed to think about. Not did John show up for work, or did the delivery van have gas in it? When I stopped thinking about the little things and started thinking about the big things and working on the big things, that's when the business grew. So that's what this book I think can help you do.
Fascinating. I mean, is it available on Amazon?
It sure is. Yeah.
Thank you. So for all our viewers and listeners, Rhett's book is available on Amazon. Rhett, on that note, I just want to say thank you so much. It's been such a privilege speaking to you. Thank you for talking to me about your incredible toy company, Wild Creations. Thank you for giving us so much input on courageous leadership and what is really the meaning of courage. And thank you also for talking to me about your book of actions, which clearly is like a ready reckoner on multiple subjects. So thank you again and good luck.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.